Hi and welcome to Hedgehog Hollow. Today I'm going to show you a beautiful 3D mandala box card. This is the card we're going to make using the Concord and 9th Many Mandala sets. I'm going to show you how to cut it so that your mandala will go inwards. We're going to make this beautiful box around the edge, and we're also going to show you some tips with heat embossing and applying jewels. So let's take a closer look at the card and let's get started with our tutorial. So to start with, we're going to start with our mandala so that it cuts in like this. You can see this lovely effect that you get from the mandala. It's a little bit different. Normally people mount them going upwards, but this is from a technique I used to do years and years ago when I worked with a company called Outlines. And so I put it into this mandala and I think it looks beautiful. I'm also going to show you how to make this box element here. It will still stand up. It is not too front heavy. I've had this standing up for a week or so and it never fell over on me, so it's still works absolutely fine just with a normal Neenah. So this is not Neenah, this is shimmery gold white, but we'll get to that in a second. We'll do our sentiment, we're going to heat emboss all of our layers, and then we're going to do this box piece as well. Now, with regards to sending, I found in Joann's from Die Cut with a View some envelope boxes. This fits in there absolutely perfectly. Alternatively, you could wrap it in some tissue paper or make a custom envelope using an envelope punch board. So let's start by stamping out our mandalas. So we're going to use that lovely Concord and 9th Many Mandala set. Now this looks really complicated when you see it in the packaging, but I love Concord and 9th because they always give you tools to make things super easy. Now you can stamp this out with a stamp press in just 2 stampings, which I was really surprised at. I thought I'd be here for ages layering up all these different layers, but not at all. So they give you this wonderful tool to help you line up your stamps. And what we're going to do is I'm going to use a MISTI so that I can stamp multiples at once. You want to pop your cardstock down, pop it into a corner. So I've got mine just in this snug corner down here. And then I pop the acetate piece that they give you over the top. Now let's put our cardstock back. And I'm just going to hold this down. Now, you want to layer on your stamps. So you can do 2 at a time. So we're going to do this one, and then this one and the center. So to do that, you want to pull off this piece here, and you're going to put it down onto your acetate. Now, normally, of course, I look from an angle because the camera is looking on the bird's eye view down, but I'm just going to move this towards me so I can look straight down, because if you remember from high school chemistry, when you look from an angle, you don't necessarily get the right view. Make sure you are looking top down and you're looking to see, you can see here, that you can see the black exactly through the stamp. So to do that, we'll close down our lid and pick up that piece. And then we're also going to layer in our middle piece. So I'm going to do exactly the same again. And by just getting that one piece out the way, it makes it a little bit easier to maneuver. So I'm just moving this towards me so I can see the top down. It does just take a little bit of moving about, but this tool makes it so easy. So let's move that back. And again, I can pick up that second piece, and then I can remove my acetate. And I'm going to use one of these magnets, oops, on my MISTI corner, and I'll use one down here. I'm going to stamp it out using some Versamark. So I'm putting my powder tool down first. Make sure it's well inked and stamp it down. You want to give it a little bit of pressure all over. And I'm just tilting this to the side to make sure I've picked up all the different pieces. Looks like it. And then what I do is I stamp all of my layers on all my sheets so that I can pick out the best ones for each layer, because you may find that some just don't stamp as well as others, and it saves you from doing a lot more work later on. So I'll grab my little red tray, which is here, and pop this back in. Give it a nice flick on the back side to get rid of any extra residue. There's a little bit there that doesn't seem to have picked up quite so well, and that was in the inking. So next time I'll make sure that I ink this inner one even more, and that's a great reason why I do it on all my layers. So I'm just going to heat emboss this. So I've heat embossed that, and I've now just layered my acetate over, and I've made sure that it's lined up again perfectly over what we've already stamped. Now while you had those stamps there, you want to stamp out 3, and I do 4, just 1 for luck. You need 3 to make the mandala, and a 4th one just can help you if something isn't quite right. So I would advise you stamping 4 and heat embossing those while you have it in the frame. So I've layered this up, and now we can do our next 2 layers. So I'm going to start with this layer here, and we're going to want to layer this in the middle. And again, I'm just going to pull it back so that I can look over the top and make sure it's in the right place. And make sure your stamp is the right way round will also help you a lot. Okay, so we've layered that up now. I'm going to pull my MISTI over and pick up that piece so that we can do our final middle piece, and that is in this corner down here, so you want to pull that piece off as well. And again, just make sure your acetate, you may have to just move it slightly if it's stuck to your stamp, that's fine. Just make sure they're lined up before you pop your stamp down, which mine now are. Then pop your stamp on top and wait for it to line up. And again, you can then just close your MISTI lid and pick that up. And that is all you have to do. Once we've stamped this out, our mandala is complete. So make sure you don't move your cardstock. And then I always just like to test it first, just in case anything's moved. There we go. And again, I'm going to grab my Versamark. And I'm going to stamp it down. And you want to just be sure to try and get as much detail into it as possible. Knead it with your thumbs as though you're maybe kneading a piece of bread. Tends to really work with these detailed stamps. And you're going to pick it up, and we're going to emboss it again with the same gold embossing powder. And this is just still in my tray. And if there's any areas missing, oops, you can go back and just pick them up. And as I say, so for instance here, I've missed this central bit. Well, I won't use this one as my center. So I'm going to clear this up and heat emboss, and we'll come back to do our die cutting. Again, remember you want to stamp out 3, ideally 4 of these mandalas while you have this in the right MISTI position. So our next step is to do our die cutting. So I have my 4 pieces here, and here are my dies that come in the set. Now you need one that does the outside piece, and only the outside piece. So let's cut that first. So we're going to use this detailed die, and I'm using my new masking tape. This was an Amazon recommendation, and sometimes I do just go with it, and I absolutely love it. It comes from the same company who do models and things like that, and it works really, really nicely. So I'm going to put that piece in, and then we're going to put our middle piece in. And again, I'm just going to take that down. I'm going to run this through the die cutter. So this is once it comes out the die cutter, you end up with this lovely edged piece here, and you end up with a center medallion. Now the first one I didn't come out perfectly, so I decided to redo it. So I actually have 2 edges to choose from once we assemble our card. But what you end up with are these center pieces that we can still cut out of absolutely fine. Now this one has a beautiful center, so I'm going to grab that and I'm going to cut my center. Now the problem with this center die is that it's really hard to see where you're going to cut it. Now, the first time I did it, I just decided to cut it wherever, and actually you don't notice it at all. If I hadn't told you, I'm sure in the center there, you wouldn't realize that it wasn't lined up perfectly. Now, if you do want to line it up perfectly, I have a tip for you, which is to cut it out of a piece of acetate. This is the piece that was on the back of the stamp. So this is just a piece of plain acetate, and then you can run that through your die cutter, which I'm just doing as I'm talking to you, and it will allow you to line this up really well. So let's just run that through. And what we have is a piece of window sheet that has stuck in my die cutter, but I can just pick that off. And this is what you end up with. So this is the same piece that it's going to cut, and you can layer this over the top, a bit like the template we had before. I'm just going to pick this up so I can see it a little bit closer. And you can lay it on here so that you line it up absolutely perfectly. Now, once you're happy with the alignment that you've got, you can use a little piece of tape to hold it down. And you can take your die, and it's a very tactile thing. It's not something it will show up particularly well on film, but you'll see what I mean as soon as you do it. When you do it, you'll find all of a sudden your die will click into place, which is there, which means that I can cut here and I'll end up with the perfect center. So just then pop your tape down, run this through, it'll cut through the window sheet as well. You'll see what I mean in a second, and that will give you your perfect center. So there is our perfect little cut medallion. I'm going to pop that to the side so that we don't use it. I'm going to use my little red tray here to accumulate all the pieces that we need. And then the next thing we want to do is cut our next layer in. So to do that, I'm going to grab the next die. I'm going to line it up on here. And then we're going to run this through, which will give us our next layer. So that's this one done. And I grabbed the wrong masking tape, but that will work absolutely fine. And then we want to take one of these again. So that's cut the outside edge with this. And then you're going to cut your next layer in on here. So again, we're going to line this up. I'll grab the right masking tape this time. The other one I tend to use for watercolors and things, and Maddie is doing a project next to me, so I had it out for her. So I'm going to tape this one down. I'm going to run both of these through the die cutter. We'll keep our spares over here because in case it all goes wrong on us. And you need two more die cuts. We need this central one with our centerpiece cut out. Again, you could use the acetate, but I'm just going to use this one by eye because it only needs to layer up in the middle. And then we need one with our outside edge, like this, and our inside piece. So this is the small star that goes on the inside. And I'm just going to grab some masking tape so it doesn't move when I put it through the die cutter. And this will give you all the pieces you need for your mandala. Cut these out, and then we're going to come back with our black cardstock. You're going to want to cut a card front size, and I trimmed just under 1/4 inch off one of the long sides and one of the short sides. We'll come back and stamp this, and then we're ready to get assembling. So now we're ready to do our pretty card front piece. We're going to stamp this black panel on here, and it's super easy. So I'm going to grab my Misty. And the first thing you want to do is work out where you're going to cut in your mandala. So I'm going to just stick that down. And what we're going to do is we're going to stamp this outside piece, and this will just give you a good guideline of where you are cutting later on. So let's decide where we want our mandala. You can rotate it any way you like. Now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to Versamark it down, and I'm going to just leave it there. All you need is that shadow, and it may well pick up some embossing powder as we're going, but that's all you need. It's just a guideline on there. So let's stamp that piece down. And you can just very lightly see a tone on tone if I bring it up there. And that's all we need for now. So let's put that piece back on our sheet and I'll give them all a good clean after the video. Now I'm going to use some of the other pieces in the set. So I'm going to use this piece here, maybe one of these larger ones, and I'm also going to use this leaf. So you want to stamp these around the edges. And the easiest way I found of doing that was with some acrylic blocks. So I've got 3 blocks here that I'm going to just use, and I'm going to stamp in the MISTI because I get a lovely impression, but it saves me having to move it around too much whilst I'm working. So let's grab our powder. We'll dust off all over. And now we're going to do some fun stamping. Now you want to stamp some of the edges. This centerpiece is particularly great for this. And then the easiest way to know what you've done is you can see a rough outline, but if you grab your embossing powder and just sprinkle that on, you don't need to set it at this point, but first of all it will stick nicely because it's fresh Versamark. But we'll also know where we have stamped. I think I did some over here. I'm going to give it a nice flick off to the side. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my embossing paintbrush. And I'm just going to get rid of these areas on here. The powder tool will help you just take off any excess. And we need a little bit more powder over here. And you just want to work systematically around. And you may well cover up some of the edges, but that will just add to the effect at the end. I like to add a little embossing powder and then go back and add any areas that have missed or maybe didn't stick quite as well. So I'm going to do this all the way around the outside, and then I'm going to heat emboss it, and we'll come back and I'll show you how to do your cutting. So whilst we were heat embossing, we ended up with embossing powder everywhere. We knocked the pot over. So what I did was I did my wonderful day, which is the sentiment I'm going to do for this one as a congratulations card for someone, just on some white Neenah cardstock, exactly the same. And the next thing we want to do is our centerpiece. So you want to take your second size die and cut it out the middle around those guidelines that we set with our Versamark. Now I've popped this one through ready so that we can just get going. I'm going to carefully remove my masking tape, like so. And then I have all my different layers here. So we're going to start with our outside layer, and we want to stick this on to here. Now I'd advise the Nuvo Deluxe Adhesive or the Nuvo Adhesive Pen. They work really, really well. They're super strong. They don't squelch out the sides. And what you can do is you can just run your pen around this inside line here, like this. And sometimes you'll need to go back and add more adhesive. See how we got on. Add some more on there, and we've stuck to something. So again, I'm just going round. I can feel the tackiness on my fingers, and I'm also, just to be super safe, because I know that this one's going to go in the mail to England, I'm going to add a little bit of the Deluxe adhesive as well, which has just fallen on the floor next to me. So this is the Nuvo Deluxe. It is super, super strong. I haven't had any issues with it at all. And I'm just going to add a little dot in each of these so that I know it will make it through the international mail in one piece. And again, we can put this down. You just want to line it up. It's going to line up perfectly because it's die cut, it's not hand cut. Oops. And then what I do is I run this through my Big Shot so that we can make sure it's super stuck. So I'm just going to pop that to the side. Now the next thing we want to prepare is our pieces for the box. So I have cut two 1 1/4 inch strips of black cardstock. I have scored 1/4 inch from this edge and 1/4 inch from this edge so that you have 3/4 inch in the middle here. And then I've scored 4 inches and then a further 5 1/4 inches because that is the size of my card base. And then I've put an extra little piece on the end so that we can stick our two strips together. So let's do that. I'm going to use some of the Elizabeth Craft Designs double-sided tape. It's nice and thin and nice and strong. This is the same as the double-sided adhesive we quite often use for our glitter cuts. And then you're going to want to layer this edge here. So again, this one is exactly the same, 4, 5 1/4 and an extra piece. And you're going to layer this edge, which goes up to the 4, onto this score line there. Now the other thing you want to do is take a sharp pair of small snips, and you're going to snip both sides at those score lines. So that's at the 4, this is at the 5 1/4. Whoops, I knocked my piece here. Let's press that back down. And again, you're going to want to snip here where you've married those two up. And you're only snipping into that first 1/4 inch line. And this will give us a nice fold at the corners. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply some double-sided tape all the way along those 1/4 inch pieces. So you're going to start one end to the other. You want your tape to marry up to that score line. I folded mine before this just to make sure they'll marry up perfectly. But you want to put this all the way along. So I've run this through my Big Shot so I know it's really well stuck, and I have my long piece here as well. So the next thing we are going to do is we're going to peel off one side of our double-sided tape. Now I also went through and I re-snipped all my score lines. I like to do them twice because sometimes the tape can obscure them from one side or the other, so it just makes it nice and easy. And now we're going to start at the side that is just a crisp edge rather than this piece that we're going to overlap at the end. And we're going to just lay this down onto here so that our fold line, which I'm just going to fold over to show you, our fold line wants to be on the edge of our card. So that means that piece will marry up there. And then that snip that we made will allow us to turn the corner really easily. And I am sticking to everything in my workspace, of course, because there's embossing powder and adhesive and everything everywhere this morning. So I'm just going to go along here. And the Elizabeth Craft Designs tape's quite forgiving if you need to go back like this now. And I need to lift this piece up. And then I can just go back and re-stick it. So you can see I can just stick that onto there. Again, our snip is going to allow us to turn that corner beautifully. And that's why we put that snip in there. So that's nicely on the edge, and we'll give it a nice firm down afterwards. And again, that snip will allow us to turn the corner perfectly. So once you have got to your final corner, and if you do have any adhesive that's kind of just outside the edges, just grab your adhesive rubber or your sand rubber and that will remove it for you. Don't worry, all these supplies will be linked up in the blog post, which is in the descriptions below. So if you need to refer to that, you can. And then that last piece of tape will just allow me to stick those two pieces together at the end. So that gives us our final corner in there. And I'm just going to open it up just slightly and make sure it's really firmly stuck. The last corner is probably the most fiddly corner. Just because you're trying to get all those ends together and make it nice and neat. So there we go. So that's our final corner done. Now the next thing that we're going to do, and I've forgotten to snip one of my score lines here, is we're going to take off our piece of top tape. So I'm going to just pull this off all the way around. And this creates our nice box. Then we're going to just fold it. So we're going to go from this corner, then we're going to fold that nice snip over again, and I'll fold our snip over again, and I'll fold my final snip over here as well. And this means we can just stick this straight onto our card front. There's no messing around, and it makes it nice and neat. This is the card front I'm going to use. It's a piece of shimmery gold cardstock. Again, I'll link it up for you. 8.5 by 11 cut down lengthways. You could use A4 if that's what you can get in your market, and then just cut it down accordingly. And then we're going to center this on our card front. I have left a little bit of room all the way around so that it will stick down nicely, and then just give it a reasonably firm press. It's quite strong. You can give it a nice firm press. So this is now our mandala. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick all of these pieces in using foam tape. I'm going to speed this up slightly. I know you'll still be able to see all the different details, and put some music to it so you don't have to keep hearing me talk over it. So here's our assembled mandala. You saw that I just used a piece of double-sided adhesive in the middle there, and I just picked up some so that it stuck down really nicely. Now we're going to add on our jewels and our sentiment, and then we will be finished. So there we have our finished card. You could see me wrangling around with the gems, but it does come out beautifully. You'll also see they added different sizes, and it makes a real difference to the kind of effect you get on the card as well. And I put my sentiment on with another piece of the foam strip, and then we are all done. So I hope you enjoyed that. These are the micro brushes that you've seen me use before, if you're wondering what I was using on the gems. But please do stop on over to the blog post. It's linked down in this bottom right hand corner. There's an arrow somewhere around here, and just click that. It'll give you the link to the blog post, and you can see some more in-depth pictures. We've taken some pictures of the inside so that you can have a good look around and see what it looks like in the flesh. Happy stamping. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.